Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm Eliana Kernodle. Most people have firsthand experience with student loan debt or know someone who does, so it's probably no surprise to hear just how much student loan debt Americans have. Joining me to tell us more about this is the Center Square's education reporter, Esther Wickham. Esther, there's some data out from WalletHub on the best and worst states for student loan debt. Can you tell us some of the major points from this report?
Yeah, thanks, Aliana. So just starting off, it's no surprise that, as the years have gone by, the total student loan balance has significantly increased. This is in effect with the cost of, tuition, inflation, the economy as a whole. But right now, the United States is at a balance of $1.66 trillion, according to this WalletHub report released in September. And so that's the total amount altogether, all 50 states plus the District of Columbia, of how much students owe back in student debt. And so looking a little bit deeper into this report, it looked at the, breaking it down, the worst and the best states. So the amount, the lowest compared to the highest, looking at all 50 states plus the District of Columbia. And it graded each state on a 100-point scale, not just focusing on that dollar amount. And we'll, get into that a little bit later in the podcast, but it focused on specific metrics of the economic situation of the state. And if, the students that owed this certain amount of debt were able to have each installment, have each payment month to month for their student debt, what their quality of life looked like. And so, for example, some of the metrics this report looked at was cost of living in the state, what unemployment rates looked like, and while they were in college or even post-grad, what did internships look like? Internship opportunities, specifically paid internships for these students. And so at the end of the report, they concluded, looking at all the data, that the number one state with the most student debt is the state of Mississippi. And we can get into that a little bit more, looking at the average amount of student loan owed was actually total for the state was $17 billion for student loan debt. And according to the report, it said that looking at, people's finances, this equaled to about 56% of the median income household in these states. So more than half of what people were making is what they actually owed in student debt. Even looking at the rate of debt, this was a realization that the economic status of this state did not equate to how much people owed. So, for example, people would graduate from a university in the state of Mississippi, and they would not have the opportunities compared to other states to get a great job, potentially in their field, meaning that they were having trouble paying their loans off that they had borrowed. And so as the report kind of goes on, it indicates that Mississippi is the fourth worst availability of jobs for students, and the second lowest share of paid internships, which the first being Louisiana. So in this report, and even talking to the analyst that looked at this report, he kind of breaks it down that, even though Mississippi is not the number one state that has that dollar amount of student debt owed, it has a low and struggling economy to combat those loans that students are taking out, because they don't have the proper, opportunity to get jobs, to have high paying, internships within school, and to properly, make sure that they are paying off their loan installments each month.
Yeah. And for a good contrast, tell us a little bit about California, which has significantly more in total dollar amount. How are they not the number one state?
In the report, California is ranked 49th out of the best and worst state for student debt. So on average, California students owe close to $38,000 or $40,000, equaling $151.5 billion. So as you can see, significantly more than what Mississippi owes in total. But looking at the same metrics, unemployment rates, paid internship opportunities, even potentially private loan deferment programs or loan forgiveness programs, California wins out. And so, this state has a high, student loan debt number, but they also have very high paid income state, and residents, are able to get very well paying jobs out of college. I'm sure if you go to any LinkedIn of any, UC student or Stanford student or school that a student is attending, you go to their LinkedIn, I'm sure you would find so many different credentials, so many different, programs, internships, opportunities that these students are getting before they even hit the age of 21, and so this is a state that really, focuses on opportunity and specifically paid internships for college students that once they graduate college, they have options. These companies are actually coming towards them saying, hey, we want to offer you this job. And straight out the gate, students are making upwards of, 65, 70, and even higher $1,000 a year. And so in this contrast, sure, they have a lot of student debt they have to pay off if they have to owe, but they have a better chance of paying it off quicker because of the opportunities that they had, where when you compare that to Mississippi, those students are just not getting those same opportunities.
Yeah, and also, I'm sure part of it too is just population amount. Like Mississippi has a vastly lower population than California. So of course the state's total would be larger even if the like per capita rate was similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And even looking at that, loan balance per resident, because it is a more low income state, the economy specifically in Mississippi and these other, top the four states that they mention, they're in pretty poor shape right now. And so when they get that money, they are wanting to put it towards other things that are of, importance. And so we'll show you a clip right now of the interview that I had with Chip Lupo. He's the WalletHub analyst, talking a little bit about, when students graduate from these low income states that are struggling, economically, they have other things to worry about in their life than just making sure they pay off their student loans. Take a look.
Grant money is shrinking in a lot of states, student work opportunities. And again, you're talking about low unemployment rates. Now, you could be in a state with a pretty decent employment rate, but in some areas like Mississippi, the rate for 25 to 34-year-olds, that prime part of your life where you should be focusing on paying down your student loan debt. And also one thing that people don't look at is underemployment, where you're working maybe several pay grades where you should be based on your education, or you're having to take on maybe multiple part-time jobs while you're trying to find a full-time job, that type of thing. Those jobs tend not to pay as well. And then again, that when you're already in a low income state, that translates into more of your income going towards student loan debt. Now, that's just student loan debt, period. That's not even counting all the rest of the debt, because what we found recently is that student loan debt, while technically not considered household debt, like mortgages and car loans and credit card loans, it's second in the amount of debt, second only to mortgages.
So something he highlights is there are other payments that these students or these people, graduating, whether it be from undergrad, grad school, law school, have to pay for: credit card, car loans, mortgages, and those payments are more timely. They're more evident in their life, these monthly payments, where with student debt, they're depending on the loan that you receive, there's a 6-month grace period. There is, opportunities for student loan forgiveness or deferment programs. And so, as we see this kind of trend where the cost of tuition is increasing, students have to take out more debt. And then depending on the state you're in, you can't even pay back that debt. These students are kind of getting caught in this web. Kind of going off of the states that we've talked about, just to name a few, following the state of Mississippi with the most student debt, there's the state of New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and South Dakota, all kind of following that same idea. Low income state, low opportunity for paid internships, for jobs. And so therefore they have a lot of debt that these students have to pay off. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, there is the state of Washington, New Mexico, California, Utah, and Hawaii. And this is, the same idea we talked about with California. There is a high percentage of the amount of income these students are getting, high opportunity for paid internships. And we see in the state of Mississippi and other states respectively, those opportunities just aren't as ripe for the picking compared to these other states.
And you mentioned a little bit earlier how, loan forgiveness and all of that plays into this. Can you just touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So as I've mentioned before, the cost of tuition is not a surprise. It's almost doubled in the past 2 decades. Naturally, is an occurrence that these students are taking out more debt if they are unable to pay for it up front, or if their parents aren't able to cover that tuition amount. But looking into student loan forgiveness program, especially at the federal level, has been a huge issue for the previous administration. The Biden administration really saw this issue of student debt and wanted to combat it and find a solution for it. And looking at the data, in the administration's time, they were able to relieve over 5 million borrowers, which was upwards of around $190 billion. And so on the offset, you're like, wow, that's a big number. But let's compare that, with the national student debt currently, as we said at the beginning, which was $1.66 trillion. That's only 11% of student loan debt relieved, and so still it is a significant amount. But as we have seen the actions taken by the Trump administration, they believe that is not the best solution. That's not actually solving the issue that we see with student debt, with students not being able to pay off the cost of tuition. And even as we've seen the administration kind of taking some legal action against these student loan forgiveness programs. And, something to note, Chip Lupo, the WalletHub analyst, kind of mentioned at the end that he thinks the solution would be to lower the cost of tuition so that students don't have to take out as much debt. And something that he, said is that instead of coming from the federal level, these student loan programs should be given back to the banks, which would, privatize it and create more competition for receiving loans. And so then for that reason, college could be a little bit more affordable and students would not have to borrow so much money. And he added towards the end, he said, you can't erase debt. This idea that that the federal government can just automatically, forgive loans, is not, true. You can't erase it and just say, oh, it never existed. Someone still has to, dissolve that money and it does have to be paid off and it has to go somewhere. And so
it's more of a transfer than anything.
Yeah, exactly. Just like the saying of nothing is ever free. There is a cost somewhere, and just because that one student or that group is getting their debt forgiven, they don't see on their ledger an amount owed. They see zero, but somewhere else someone is covering that. And so it'll be interesting to see as the Trump administration continues their efforts to, work on the different parts of FAFSA, reducing the amount of how much students can actually borrow and what their efforts are for the cost of tuition. But as of now, we see the overall student debt increasing. And as long as these states continue to shrink when it comes to economic vitality and opportunities for students, these students, are going to be struggling right out the gate as soon as they graduate from college.
Esther, thank you for your insights on this story. You can follow this story and more at thecentersquare.com.